First of all, let's talk about our club, Astronomines. It's a club that was founded 3 years ago, and its main goal is to make science directed towards society and to help everyone understand what science is, no matter how much it may seem hard or difficult. It's a common trend that's called pop science, okay, popular science. So we prepared a lot of questions to ask you about your job as an astronaut, about your experience with Asteroid Day. We would like to thank you again for coming here. Our school is very honored for having you. And okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Edward Tsang Lu is an American astronaut. He spends about 206 days in space. Also, he is co-founder of V617 Foundation, dedicated to protecting the Earth from asteroid strikes. I would like to thank the school administration and Astronomy Club organization and make this event possible.
So first off, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to get to speak to people in Morocco, which is the first time I've ever spoken to anyone in Morocco from California. So thank you all. I'm very pleased and impressed with your astronomy club, and I want to encourage you to keep working and to keep studying and to keep exploring. So I would first like to just tell a little bit about myself. My plan for today is that I was going to give a very short presentation, just a little bit about some of the work that I've done, and leave the great majority of the time for question and answer, because I think that will be much more interesting for you. So again, my name is Ed Lu. I was an astrophysicist by training, and I had the pleasure of working as a NASA astronaut for 12 years, from 1995 until 2007. I flew my first mission aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis in 1997, where we flew the space shuttle to the Russian space station called Mir. We docked and provided supplies. We brought an astronaut up there who stayed. And my second mission was also aboard the space shuttle in the year 2000. And we were one of the first missions to begin the construction of the International Space Station. So it was a lot smaller then than it is now. Our job was to install the crew quarters, the living quarters for the astronauts, where all the life support systems at that time were going to be located. And I got to do a spacewalk to help connect that new module called the service module. And then my third mission was immediately following the crash of the Space Shuttle Columbia, in which we decided to send less than 2 months, or approximately 2 months afterwards, we sent one American and one Russian to the space station as an emergency crew. So myself and a Russian cosmonaut flew aboard a Russian Soyuz, leaving from Baikonur to the International Space Station, and I spent 6 months with just one other person, Colonel Yuri Malenchenko of the Russian Air Force. Following that, I continued to work at NASA for a number of years, and then I left. I decided that it was time to do something different, and my family and I moved to California, where I took a position with Google. And I helped build Google Maps, Google Earth, Google Street View, and various mapping services for Google. After that, I've been working for the last about 9 years on the problem of asteroid impacts on Earth, and thus the Asteroid Day connection. So we've been working hard to find and track and map the locations and trajectories of asteroids that could hit Earth, so that we can calculate their orbits and calculate ahead if any of these has the possibility of hitting Earth. There's quite a large number of scientists around the world working on this problem, and we are a small group that is really working hard on the calculation of orbits and understanding the uncertainties in the orbits, so that we can understand the probability that any one of these particular asteroids has of hitting the Earth, and if so, on what date? Because it turns out that if you know that an asteroid is going to hit the Earth, it is relatively easy to prevent it from hitting the Earth, as long as you know years ahead of time, and that's our goal. So we're working to identify asteroids that could hit the Earth, and then missions can be flown to prevent that asteroid from hitting the Earth. And that's as simple as hitting it with a small spacecraft. You just run into it. The first test of that technology is going to be done in just 3 years' time. NASA itself will be flying a mission called DART, which is going to run into a small asteroid to test the deflection of it. Our role, and the role of many other scientists around the world, is to help find and track and understand which, if any, of these asteroids we are going to need to deflect. So in short, that's what I've been doing for about the last 20 years. And I thought I would end that right there and just open this whole event up to questions so that you can ask about whatever it is that you're interested in. So I welcome your questions. It would be best if whoever asks comes up and stands in front of the camera, then I can hear it easier.
First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It's really an honor to speak in front of you. My question is, what is the thing that you missed about space and the International Space Station when you came back to Earth?
That's a very good question. First of all, thank you. I think that the thing I missed the most after I got back was two things. Number one is the view. Looking out the window as we went around the Earth, you never knew what you were going to see outside as you were over some different part of the world, always. It was the most spectacular view you can imagine. The second thing that I think I missed is the feeling of being weightless, the ability to fly. You know, if you are in a room and you decide you want to, fly up to the ceiling, you can. You just push off gently. And I definitely miss that feeling, because here on the ground, I'm just like everybody else. We have to walk, we have to sit, we have to lift things, and it's different. And I truly miss that.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Great question.
Hello. Thank you so much for giving us time to answer our questions. My question to you is, what are the habits that you learned during your time in space and then you are incorporating in your life right now?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, this is actually something that we try and teach our kids. Because one of the real difficult things about flying in space is the sheer number of things you have to do each day. The habit you have to get into is being very organized, getting things done and not putting them off, and being organized enough to know what you still have left to do in each day. And as you may know, this is a difficult thing for many people, especially children, especially my children, who as many kids, have a tendency to be disorganized, forget where they leave their things, and sometimes not budget the proper amount of time for doing things like their homework or washing the dishes or whatever it is they're supposed to do. So I think one of the lessons that I've learned from spaceflight on a personal level like that is just the beauty of being organized. It makes everything simple. That may not have been the answer you were looking for, but honestly, it's one of those life lessons that's actually very, very useful.
It's a question from a viewer that I will ask again.
The question is, how can we determine and put in a picture stars and galaxies, because we don't have a camera that lives that far to take pictures?
Oh, how do we? Can you explain to me which kind of camera are you talking about? And
he didn't mention any camera. He just said what are technologies that allow us to see stars to have pictures of stars?
Okay, well, obviously there is a lot of technology that is able to do that. And so I'm not sure if he's asking about he or she is asking about buying their own camera to take pictures of stars and galaxies, which is possible actually. And for instance, someone could even use an iPhone or a cell phone like you're carrying right there to take pretty decent photographs now of planets and stars. I've seen them. There's an attachment that you can buy for a cell phone just like that you can attach to a telescope. And the images are surprisingly good.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Hello,
Hello.
Mr. Hi. I just want to ask you one question. What effects your trip to space had on your body?
Good question. The question is about the physical effects of space flight on your body. Well, there are some, because in space, without the pull of lifting your weight and having to use your muscles as much, your muscles can atrophy. Your bones can also lose calcium if they're not carrying as much weight. So I don't know if you or anyone you know has ever broken a bone and been in the hospital for some period of time, broken an arm or a leg or something like that. You may know that after you get the cast off and look at the size of your arm or leg, it's shrunk, right? And it's not as strong. The muscles have shrunk, and that's exactly what would happen to you if you didn't exercise in space.
Are you exercising?
So we had a treadmill in which you could run. And if you think about it, running on something is difficult because you'll move away from the treadmill. So the way it works is that you're attached to the treadmill using bungee cords.
Okay.
And so we ran on that every day. We also had a bicycle, but the most important thing turned out to be weightlifting, which we did using levers and pulleys and elastic cords, same thing.
Okay.
So it was possible to put on a bar, and we had a metal plate that you could sort of put your feet on and lift the bar just like you were weightlifting.
Yeah, okay.
And we could put almost 200 kilos on that bar from the strength of the elastic cords. And then we would lift that.
Easily.
And because of that, I did not really lose much muscle mass or any bone mass really to speak of. And since the last perhaps 10 years, this is something that we figured out in space, that most astronauts today come back with very little muscle or bone loss at all. And I think that's essentially a solved problem. We know how to, and it's simply a matter of lifting weights.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
Hello. I am very glad to have the opportunity to talk to you. My question is, how does Earth looks like from the International Space Station? And that's my question.
The view of the Earth is beautiful. Now, remember that we're not that high above the Earth. We are approximately 250 miles, so 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth.
Very far.
So, if you are over Morocco, for instance, and I look down, straight down, I'll see Morocco below me, and I can see most of the country. On one side, I can see probably about as far as probably northern Spain into England. Looking south, I can probably see to Central Africa. Looking east from over the top of Morocco, I should be able to see past Saudi Arabia.
Do you see only dark? You see the Earth in the center and the dark from surrounded by darkness?
Yes, yeah. The darkness of the sky is very, very black.
Yes, as if it is paralyzed.
Oh, go ahead.
As if it was suspended in the space.
It really does look that way. I see from where we are, since we're only 400 kilometers away from the Earth is large.
Yes.
So it fills half of your field of view. What looks like that is the moon. Looks like it's sitting there suspended in the middle of the sky.
Yes.
The Earth really looks huge from where we are, because we're not, compared to the size of the Earth, we're fairly close to it still.
Yes, you can see other planets.
You can see other planets. I used to enjoy looking at Mars with binoculars, and Venus, obviously, just like you can on the ground. The biggest, most impressive thing, though, is to look at the Earth. It's bright. The colors are very bright. The blue of the ocean, the dark blues of the deep ocean, the lighter blues of the shallower waters. It's just beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your time. I want to ask you, how can someone become an astronaut?
Well, at least I can answer this in the United States. This obviously isn't going to be the same for you, but in the United States, you send an application, and once every 2 to 3 years, NASA picks astronauts. They'll pick a group of astronauts that they hire, and they move to Houston, Texas to begin training. So that happened to me in 1995. Now, the answer to this question is going to be different in the future, because not only NASA, there is obviously Russia, there is the European Space Agency, there is the Canadian Space Agency and the Japanese Space Agency, and so on. But there are also going to be commercial astronauts. The very first commercial flights to the International Space Station will be happening in about a year. There are 2 commercial vehicles, one built by SpaceX, one built by Boeing, that are going to fly to the International Space Station. And so I believe in the next 10 years or so, we'll be seeing a number of commercial astronauts, both people who are working for companies that are launching spaceships and working for them, as well as people paying to go on these trips. So the field is going to be very, very different in 10 years, I believe.
So there are specific things that we should study, like engineer, you should be an engineer or something, or something like that.
At least,
or just
yes. At least in the United States, that's true. The way NASA picks its astronauts is we are generally engineers, scientists, or pilots, or some combination of them. For instance, I was an electrical engineer, a physicist, and a pilot before I was selected. So, but in the future, I think that is going to change. And so, especially as we build permanent colonies on the moon or Mars and things like that, there will be people from many occupations. However, currently, I think at least if you want to work for one of the space agencies, NASA or ESA or something like that, then it is mostly restricted to scientists, engineers, and pilots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, can you describe us your first experience? How was your feeling when you get out of the Earth?
My first flight was in 1997, and before the launch, while we were sitting on the launch pad waiting, you're mostly nervous. Nervous about what it's going to feel like, making sure you do a good job, thinking about all the things that you're supposed to do. And it's a little difficult to enjoy it because you're very busy making sure you do a good job.
Yeah.
And the ride itself into space is only takes 8.5 minutes on a shuttle. So from launch to the time until you get into orbit is only 8 minutes and 30 seconds. So it happens fairly quickly. But I do remember seeing the Earth for the first time from space and just being amazed. So floating in the window, still wearing my helmet, I hadn't even taken my helmet off, and looking at the Earth was just amazing. And I'll never forget that. I have to say that as you go to your second and third launches and so on, the ability, you are much more able to enjoy the ride because you're more used to, you know what to expect. And you're not as, I believe, nervous about all your tasks that you have to do. You know you can, that may not have been the answer you were looking for, but honestly, it's one of those life lessons that's actually very, very useful to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. First
Hello.
of all, it's such an honor to be here talking to an astronaut for the first time in my life. I have a few questions in mind.
Hopefully not the last time.
Hopefully. I have a few questions in mind that I would like to ask you. First of all, were there any surprises in your missions to space? Some things that you weren't planning for that happened?
There's always surprises. There's always things, especially when you're doing complicated things, that don't work as you planned. And so, we've had many things break. We've had many things not work as you thought, and we've had to come up with new plans along the way. So to give you an example, on the shuttle, we've had our radar go inoperative, meaning stop working while we were rendezvousing with the space station, and we had a backup plan, which was we were going to use a laser instead to calculate our distance. So that worked fine. On board space station, there's always a failure of some sort. We had our carbon dioxide removal system break. We've had alarms that have gone off incorrectly that we had a fire. We did not actually have a fire, but the alarm went off, and it sure scares you in the middle of the night when you don't know what's happening. All you know is that the alarm is going off. So I think that you just have to remain flexible, because what you think might happen happens most of the time, but not all the time.
Okay. I have another question, and that would be, if you are to choose another mission to space, an ideal mission, what would it be?
Well, I'm no longer an astronaut, so I no longer get to choose. But if I had the choice, I would love to fly to Mars. And I've always wanted to see what it would look like with my own eyes to be standing on the surface of Mars.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is that something you would like to do? I have a question for you.
Yes, of course. I just want to see Earth. That's it.
Okay. Well, I hope to see your face in the newspaper.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again, Mr. Lu.
Hello again.
Yeah, I have another question. So, how much oxygen do you need up there?
The average person breathes a few liters of pure oxygen per day.
Okay.
So it's actually not that much. Now, you cannot breathe air unless the oxygen is above a certain concentration.
Yeah, of course.
So you have to maintain a high enough concentration of oxygen, but what your body uses is only about something like 5 liters a day. It's not that much. And so that's what we have to continually add that to the atmosphere each day in order to keep the concentration stable.
Okay, and you stayed there up there for 6 months, I guess, or more?
Yeah, 3 missions. One of them was 9 days, one was 12 days, and one was 6 months.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Edward.
Hello.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My question is that have you ever kept a souvenir, a material souvenir from space?
Do I have any material souvenirs from space? I do. After the flight, they allow you to keep something from your flight, usually small, that's not going to be used again. So I will show you something right now.
Oh.
This is the glove from my Soyuz launch, because they are fitted to your hand. It doesn't fit any other astronaut because it's exactly the shape of, it's actually the size of my hand. So they give it to you after your flight. So this is a souvenir that I have.
Thank you.
I have a question actually. Hello again.
Hello.
I have a question about Asteroid Day. Since
Yes.
it's really close and it's on the 30th of June, and our club is the one who will be organizing it.
That's fantastic.
Yes, and we would like to ask you if you could give us any advice or could provide any help to help us in our organization.
Well, I don't have any better advice than you're probably already getting, but I will say that your enthusiasm will come through. If you're enthusiastic, then the people who come will be too. And I think that if you do this well, you will find that next year will be even bigger.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Lu again.
Hello again.
So my question is, before you went to the International Space Station, were you helped or tutored by former astronauts? What were the tips that they gave you, and what tips would you give to us people who dream about going to space?
Well, in fact, we are trained by other astronauts in the same way that when a pilot becomes a pilot, they don't just say, "Oh, here's an airplane, go fly it." They're taught by other pilots who are experienced. And so actually, it's one of our jobs as astronauts was to help the newer astronauts learn so they knew what to expect. And so the older astronauts did the same for me. So I went through many years of training to learn how to fly the shuttle, or to learn how to fly the Soyuz, or to operate the space station, and so on. So there's a lot of things to learn. But also, they tend to teach you things that aren't in the books. Because sometimes, it's not just learning all the numbers and all the procedures. It's about things to expect, things to not worry about, things you should worry about, and so on. I do remember, for instance, I had flown the space shuttle a few times, and then I was assigned to fly a Russian Soyuz. And immediately after we reached space, the Soyuz spacecraft separates from the third stage of the rocket booster. So there's a big rocket booster that runs out of fuel, and they fire off. There are some bolts that are called exploding bolts. So what they do is they crack open, and that releases you from the booster. Now the reason that's important is because the booster immediately following that is spun up. So it rotates very fast so that it will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. You don't want to be still connected to it when it does that.
Yeah.
So my job immediately following launch was to verify that in fact we had separated, and I had a couple of buttons that I could push that would fire a different method of disattaching from the third stage booster if the automatic method failed for some reason. So there was 3 lights that I had to look for in particular that told us that we had separated from the booster. So I had to look for a combination of 3 particular lights on the instrument panel. And my Russian crewmate, Yuri, said to me, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about that." He goes, "In the simulator, you have to look for the 3 lights." He goes, "But in space, you'll know." But in the simulator, you just look for the 3 lights, because the simulator, remember, doesn't move. It's just on the ground, and it's just, you're looking at the 3 lights, and I memorized my 3 lights, and I was ready to go. And when we got to space on that day, Yuri and I, we were the only 2 people in the capsule. Right after we got into space and we separated from the capsule, there is an explosion underneath the seats, which is the sound of those bolts disattach, and you're thrown off of the thing like somebody kicked you out of a room. And so, I mean, it was obvious that you were not attached to it anymore because you went flying off the front of this thing. Your whole ship, you know, it was loud. And he looked at me and he goes, "See, I told you you would know." So,
Yeah.
and there were things like that, you know, he'd say, you know, or people would tell people, "Oh, you know, the instructors will tell you this, but here's what really is going to happen." And there's always things like that. So it
And-
was, go ahead.
The tips that you would like to give us as future, not future astronauts, but people who would like to go to space.
Well, I would say keep trying, meaning the average astronaut applies to NASA or to ESA or whoever multiple times before they're accepted and has had multiple setbacks in their life. Things don't always go as you plan, and that's part of life. And the people who make it are the ones who keep trying. You know, I mean, you know, we've all had in our lives events that go well or didn't go well or whatnot. But the people, you know, if you look at who gets to where they want to go in the end, it's the person who didn't give up. And so if I could give you any piece of advice, it would be that you can always find a way. And even though it may look like things didn't go your way, maybe you can learn from it and still figure out a way.
Okay, thank you. That's a very wise thing to say.
Thank you.
Hello again.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few questions about the ISS.
Uh-huh.
What is the time zone that you use aboard?
That's a decent question because the two control centers that we have for ISS are located in different time zones, one in Houston, Texas, and one in Moscow. So what we decided to do was to choose a time zone in the middle, Zulu time. So it's Greenwich Mean Time. So in other words, it was inconvenient for everyone in Houston and also inconvenient for everyone in Moscow.
Okay, so you sleep, right?
Yeah, we sleep fine there.
So what are the sleep cycles you have? Like, when do you sleep?
We slept on, you know, on Greenwich Mean Time, and we were given approximately 8 hours to sleep.
And you're not allowed to do as you please. You have to sleep when you have to sleep and wake up.
No, it's just like on the ground, you know. Whereas if you don't sleep enough, within a few days you feel it, right? Or maybe even the first day you feel it. So it's up to you to be responsible and you know, get your rest, because you can't go on no sleep forever. Anyone who's tried it will know that's not possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Edward, just can you give us an idea about sleeping without gravity?
Sleeping without gravity is actually pretty easy, I found. We slept in a sleeping bag, but you float in the middle of it. So you never really roll over, you just sort of float in the middle of your sleeping bag. It's very comfortable. Hello.
Hello. My question is, do you believe that there is life outside Earth? That one day can we live outside Earth?
I believe that there's a high chance that there is life somewhere else in the universe. Somewhere. I don't know where. Just simply because one of the things that we've learned in the last few years because of the Kepler mission, which you may know of, the Kepler mission discovered that nearly every star in our galaxy has planets. And that means that since we know that there are approximately 10 billion stars in our galaxy, there are at least 10 billion planets in our galaxy. And I would find it amazing if there wasn't life on some of them besides Earth. So I have no proof of that. I don't know if it's intelligent life. It may be just bacteria or something like that. But I would find it absolutely amazing if Earth was the only planet that had life.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello again, Mr. Lu.
Hello.
So I have two questions. The first one, how many sunsets and sunrises do you experience every day up there in the ISS?
So let's do a little bit of math here. It takes approximately 90 minutes or 1 hour and a half to go around the Earth.
Okay.
So therefore, in 24 hours, we have 16 sunrises and sunsets per day.
Oh my God. This must be beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun. If you miss the sunset, you just wait around a few minutes and you'll see another.
Okay, my other question is the ISS has the ISS a special smell, or because they say it smells like burning out there?
Yeah, the ISS does have a smell, and there's a couple different things they are. One is the carbon dioxide removal system has a particular odor to it, which I've smelled before in a laboratory on the ground where we were testing the carbon dioxide removal system. As soon as you smell it, it's very distinctive. But when you are not on the space station, when you live in something, you don't notice the smell anymore after a while.
So it's not.
You notice it when you first get there, because the carbon dioxide removal system on both the Soyuz and the space shuttle is different. Uses a different chemical. So when you switch from one to the other, you noticed it for the first probably 20 minutes, and then after a while you don't notice it anymore. It's still there, you just don't notice it. And but you notice it when you do a spacewalk. You go outside and then you come back inside and you notice it again. Okay. So there is a smell to it. Other than that, though, most of the odors are there's a very good air filtration system on the space station. Very effective. It has a number of different filters. So most of the smells are gone. There's really not a lot of odor on the space station. So you kind of miss one of the things on the we were sort of asked about this, but one of the things that you miss in space is the smell of things.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. It's hello again.
Hello again.
My question to you is, what did you miss about Earth when you were in space?
First thing I missed was my family, but we had pretty good email, and you could talk on on the radio and so on. But I tried not to think too much about what I was missing, because I knew I was pretty lucky at the time. When you're up there for a long time, you should appreciate what you have. So one of the lessons I learned on space station is that you don't need to own material things to be happy. For instance, for my 6-month mission, I went up there and I was given 250 grams of what were called personal possessions, anything that I wanted to bring up. Not very much. So the only thing I owned for 6 months was 250 grams worth of things. A couple pictures, a notebook, a pen. That was it. I didn't spend any money. There's no place to spend any money. I didn't carry any money, right? And yet it's the happiest time of your life.
How about meals in the International Space Station? Were they delicious, or did you miss the home-cooked food?
Okay, well, I take that back. I did miss the food on the ground. Because the meals in space are okay. They're not bad, but they have a disadvantage. They all taste somewhat similar because they're all made by the same people. So do you have a favorite restaurant?
Yes.
Okay. What if you had to eat at that restaurant breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week?
I would hate it.
How long would it be before you did not like that restaurant anymore?
2 days.
Okay, well, after 6 months, that's how I felt about the food. It wasn't bad, but I wanted something different.
And what
And
was the
so-
first meal that you had when you came back to Earth?
Oh, my first thing I had was an apple. We landed in Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan is famous for their apples. They're very delicious. And after we landed, somebody handed me an apple, and it was big. It was a huge apple, and it was red, and that was just delicious. But then I wasn't allowed to eat much for the next roughly 24 hours because I was doing a bunch of medical tests. And certain medical tests they didn't want me eating, because they were going to take blood samples and so on, and so I was not allowed to eat for 24 hours. After that, though, I had a delicious. The Russians threw a barbecue on the night we landed, and they have a tradition of grilling shish kebabs. They're just delicious. And, so I had shish kebabs my first night back after 6 months. On the shuttle flights, they're short. They're only a week and a half long, so it doesn't matter, right? I can eat my favorite restaurant for a week. I'm okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, another third time or the fourth time.
That's fine. That's what this is for.
So I have two questions. The first question is, do you have access to Wi-Fi on the International Space Station?
On the ground, yes. And on ISS, we did not. Our devices were attached via Ethernet, and that was to prevent interference. So.
The second question is, so you're an astronaut that worked for NASA. What do you think about SpaceX and the other private space companies that aims to commercialize space flights?
I'm all in favor of that. I think that's progress, because, if I look back 100 years ago to the beginnings of aviation, airplanes.
Yeah.
Originally, who flew on airplanes 100 years ago? Either extraordinarily, well, actually, it wasn't even rich people at the time. It was people who worked for the military. They were military pilots only to begin with. The first airplanes were designed for military use, and that's what they did. However, within about 10 years, they were doing other things. They were actually flying mail, the first air mail routes, and then there were commercial pilots. And nowadays, it doesn't mean that much to fly in an airplane. People just consider it part of everyday life, right? And to me, that's progress. So in 100 years from now, I would love it if people took space flight as a vacation, or just to go do business. They have a business trip to the moon, for instance. I would love that. And I think that would be progress.
Thank you.
When you go to space, send me a postcard, please.
I will.
If there are no other questions, I just wanted to thank you for a great set of questions, by the way. And once again, I think your club is doing great things, and I'm happy that you're organizing an Asteroid Day event.
Yeah. Last question, Mr. Lee. Do you have a message to address to Asteroid Day and its global public on the 5th anniversary?
Yeah, my simple message about Asteroid Day is that asteroids are interesting and important, and they're going to play a big part in our development of space. And I hope that people can take some time on Asteroid Day to learn and have some fun.
Well, do you have a message to Moroccan people?
I want to say I hope to visit your country someday. I've flown over your country 1,000 times, looking down at it, and I can say it's beautiful from above. But someday I hope to have the opportunity to visit your beautiful country from the ground.
Thank you. You are welcome. We will send you an invitation soon.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.